When Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power, the world watched with doubt. Western media questioned his youth, his experience, even his loyalty to democracy. But what no one expected, what no one saw coming, was his silent move that would shake the balance in West Africa's war on terror. Behind closed military briefings and hidden from international satellites, Traoré had been training an elite, all-female unit deep in the Sahel. These weren't just soldiers. They were survivalists, martial arts experts, and guerrilla tacticians. Mothers, sisters, daughters, transformed into Burkina Faso's deadliest force, the Lionesses of the Faso. No camera had ever captured their faces. No report ever leaked their missions. But they were everywhere. Operating in total darkness, these women infiltrated terror strongholds where male soldiers failed. They disguised as traders, healers, even wives, gathering intelligence, marking targets, and calling in strikes with laser precision. Their code name, Unit Z. In January, when a notorious terror group seized the town of Satenga, holding hundreds hostage, it wasn't a drone strike or French troops that saved the town. It was the Lionesses. They moved in silently under moonlight. The terrorists were still boasting in the town square when the first explosion shattered their gathering. Chaos followed. By sunrise, all hostages were freed. Not a single lioness was lost, and no one saw them leave. Traoré, in a rare national address, finally confirmed what had only been rumors. "We are not alone in this fight," he said. "The women of Burkina Faso have risen. They are warriors. They are the reason we are still standing." But that was just the beginning, because deep in the West National Park, a new threat was growing. One that even the Lionesses had never faced before. After the victory in Satenga, whispers spread across terrorist radio channels. "They're using women," some said. "Ghost soldiers," others murmured. Panic was setting in. But deep in the dense forests of West National Park, a more dangerous alliance had formed. Foreign mercenaries, former terror leaders, and rogue generals from neighboring borders. They were planning a massive strike to destabilize the entire Sahel region. They called themselves the Black Crescent. Their mission? Take control of northern Burkina Faso and use it as a launchpad for operations stretching into Mali, Niger, and Benin. Captain Traoré summoned his top intelligence advisors. "We cannot wait for them to strike," he said. "We go now before the first bomb falls." Once again, Unit Z was called in. But this time, it wasn't just about speed. The terrain was hellish. The Black Crescent had drones, stolen satellite jammers, and European-trained snipers. Traoré himself called the Operation Shadow Pulse, a silent lightning strike. The Lionesses entered through the southern ridge under heavy rain. Using machetes and hand signals, they carved their way through the wet jungle. At night, they slept in silence, sometimes beside venomous snakes or under drone patrols. But nothing shook them. They had a mission. They had each other. On the sixth night, they found the enemy's base, an underground network hidden inside a sacred forest grove. The enemy thought they were untouchable there, surrounded by landmines and cursed terrain the locals feared to enter. But the Lionesses weren't just warriors. They were born of the land. They used ancestral tactics, camouflage made from native plants, and guidance from elderly women in nearby villages who knew the forest's heartbeat. At exactly 2:17 a.m., they launched their attack. It wasn't just a raid. It was surgical. Explosives planted with silence. Gunfire only when needed. Within 48 minutes, the entire Black Crescent command was down. Some captured, most dead, and again, not a single lioness killed. When Traoré visited the forest later, he stood over the ashes of the enemy's stronghold and simply said, "Let the world know, Burkina Faso does not beg for peace. We make it with our own blood and the fire of our women warriors." But as the Lionesses celebrated, a coded message arrived at military HQ in Ouagadougou. "Phase 2 begins. They know your secret." The message was short, chilling. "Phase 2 begins. They know your secret." At first, Traoré thought it was a bluff. But within 24 hours, strange things started happening. A fuel depot in Kaya exploded without warning. Communications in the north cut off. a senior intelligence officer poisoned in Ngorma. But the most terrifying part? A video broadcast from a hidden channel, showing a captured lioness. Bound, bruised, still defiant. The enemy had a name now, the architects. Not terrorists, not rebels, but elites, military minds trained in Europe, funded through dark networks. Their aim wasn't just chaos, it was control. And their next target? Traore himself. The president was moved to an underground bunker beneath Ouagadougou's old French fort. And for the first time, he addressed the Lionesses not as a commander-in-chief, but as a brother in arms. They've taken one of you. I don't give speeches in moments like this. I give orders. Bring her home. Break everything in your path. But this mission was different. No air support. No drones. No backup. Just a 3-woman strike team, each handpicked. Sergeant Fanta, Ghost Eyes, Zongo, Master of Disguise. Fluent in 5 tribal dialects, sniper trained. Corporal Maimouna, Stoneheart Diallo, explosive expert. Lost her brother to a terror attack. Never blinks under pressure. Lieutenant Yvette Shadowhawk Tapsoba, mission leader. Trained in Russia and Ghana. Silent walker. Feared even by her own unit. They traveled in silence, disguised as nomadic cloth traders. Crossing enemy lines took days. The forests around Pama were crawling with mercenaries. The lioness prisoner was being held in the box. A container buried underground, rigged with motion sensors, and guarded by former French legionnaires. The lionesses didn't flinch. On the 11th night, under total cloud cover, they struck. Fanta took out 2 rooftop guards with poison darts. Maimouna disarmed the explosives blindfolded. And Yvette descended into the box like death herself. What they found inside wasn't just their sister. It was documents, classified maps, names, photos, proof that a foreign government was orchestrating the entire war. The rescued lioness whispered with her final strength. They're not after Burkina Faso. They're after Africa's future. But suddenly, the base erupted in red light. The enemy had triggered a self-destruct countdown. The lionesses had just 5 minutes to escape. 5 minutes. That's all they had before the enemy compound exploded, along with the evidence and their wounded sister. Lieutenant Yvette Tapsoba didn't speak. She just moved. She threw the classified documents into a fireproof satchel, strapped it to her chest, and motioned to Maimouna. Get her out. I'll cover. But Maimouna growled back. No one stays. Not today. Fanta had already triggered a back route they found on an old smuggler's map. A tunnel used by human traffickers years ago. It was narrow, dark, and unstable. As they dragged their sister through it, the earth trembled above. The countdown hit 2:07. They burst through the tunnel's end just seconds before the mountain behind them roared into flames. The shockwaves sent them rolling through the bush. But they were alive. And they weren't alone. Dozens of locals, farmers, herders, hunters, had gathered quietly at the edge of the forest. News of the lionesses had spread. The people had been watching, praying, waiting. An old woman stepped forward, holding a calabash of water and a torn flag of Burkina Faso. She looked at Yvette with tearful eyes. My daughter was taken last year. They said she vanished. But now, I know who fought for her. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore received the documents. As he flipped through them, his hands trembled. Not from fear, but from rage. It was all there. Secret payments from European defense contractors to local warlords. Maps showing planned partition zones in West Africa. Lists of African leaders marked for destabilization. And most shocking, a photo of a high-ranking UN diplomat meeting with the very architects behind the insurgency. This isn't a war on terror, Traore said to his inner circle. This is a war to recolonize Africa by proxy. He turned to his generals. Prepare the broadcast. The world must hear the truth. But as the video was being prepared for release, the presidential palace lost power. All screens went black. Then, a cold voice echoed through the emergency speakers. You've gone too far, Captain. The lionesses were never supposed to survive. And now we're coming for you. The voice was calm, calculated. and chilling. You've gone too far, Captain. The Lionesses were never supposed to survive. And now we're coming for you. The emergency lights flickered inside the underground war room beneath Ouagadougou. No one moved. The generals stood frozen. Then Traore calmly reached for his walkie-talkie and muttered just one word. Phase red. Suddenly, across Burkina Faso, encrypted alarms rang through hidden military channels. Silos opened. Satellite jammers went dark. And hundreds of unmarked trucks, disguised as aid vehicles, started moving toward key borders. Phase red wasn't just a defense plan. It was the final protocol, a move only activated when the nation itself was under attack from within and without. Meanwhile, far from the capital, the Lionesses had not returned home. Yvette and her team had gone dark. Instead, they'd followed a digital trail hidden inside one of the recovered hard drives. It led them to a secret location in Ivory Coast, right across the border. What they found there shattered them. An underground military base, protected by foreign contractors in black uniforms, speaking French, English, and something else. Inside the base, African children, some drugged, some trained, being turned into fighters. The base was called Camp Horizon. Fanta broke down. They're building armies out of orphans. Maimouna tightened her boots. We burn it all. But Yvette paused. No. We record. We show the world first. Then we burn it. They planted microcameras. Filmed the torture rooms. The child soldiers. The shipments of cash. And the masked officers training them. But just as they were about to extract, they heard the same voice that haunted Traore's war room. Lionesses, you've come far, but the world will never believe you. And this time, there's no escape. Steel doors slammed shut behind them. Spotlights clicked on. Over a dozen armored mercenaries moved in, rifles ready. Outnumbered. Surrounded. Trapped. Fanta looked at Yvette. What now, boss? Yvette removed a blade hidden in her braid. Her eyes lit up. We go through them. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore was preparing to go live on an untraceable radio frequency used only during coups. But the CIA, French intelligence, and several African regimes were already plotting a response. Because if the Lionesses survived this next ambush and exposed Camp Horizon, it wouldn't just shake West Africa. It would collapse an entire empire built on blood, oil, and silence. The steel doors clanged shut. Mercenaries in black, faces hidden behind tactical masks, raised their rifles. The room echoed with the sharp click of safeties being turned off. The Lionesses were cornered. Yvette, blade in hand, made a split-second calculation. No windows, one door, 10 seconds to act, maximum. She whispered, Fanta, Maimouna, split, draw them, stick to shadows. The room went dark. Fanta had already tossed an EMP grenade. Sparks danced. Lights died. Confusion spread. Gunfire rang out blindly. In the chaos, Maimouna leapt from the rafters, two short, silent booms from her hand cannon. 2 mercenaries dropped. Yvette moved like wind. Silent. Deadly. She slit the throat of the lead guard and disarmed another in a heartbeat. Then she dove for the control panel. Her fingers flew over the keys. She wasn't just a warrior. She was trained in electronic warfare. In under 3 minutes, they were gone. Slipped into the base's underground sewage line. Bloody. Bruised. But alive, with all the footage in a sealed drone that had already been launched toward Burkina Faso's border. Back in Ouagadougou, Captain Traore stood before an underground broadcasting station, an old Cold War relic. He adjusted his uniform, cleared his throat, and gave the signal. This is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. What I am about to show you may cost me my life, but it will save yours. The video rolled. Children in cages, military contracts, secret French and NATO stamps on weapon crates, meetings between foreign agents and African leaders. Camps like Horizon spread across Mali, Chad, Niger, and even Burundi. The broadcast lasted 9 minutes, and by the 10th minute the world was on fire. Social media exploded. Protesters filled streets in Dakar, Kinshasa, Nairobi, and Bamako. African students in Paris stormed embassies, and international journalists started calling it the African Files. Meanwhile, across the ocean, inside a dark boardroom in Brussels, men in suits watched the broadcast in silence. One of them muttered, "He wasn't supposed to find out. Who trained those women?" Another whispered, "It's too late now." Traore lit the match. But the third man, older, cold-eyed, simply said, "Then we erase them all. The Lionesses. Him. Anyone who dares wake Africa up." A hit was ordered, not just on Traore but on every known member of Unit Z. And while Burkina Faso celebrated in the streets, assassins were already in the air. The people danced in the streets of Ouagadougou. Drums echoed. Flags waved. For the first time in years, hope filled the air. But in the sky above, for private jets crossed into West African airspace. No flight plans. No transponders. Inside, elite operatives, former intelligence ghosts, trained to make governments fall and men vanish without a trace. Their mission had one name: Project Silence. Target 1. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His location was supposed to be a secret, but someone, a traitor inside his inner circle, leaked the bunker's coordinates. At 3:26 a.m., a high-altitude drone fired a missile at his last known hideout. The explosion rocked a 5-mile radius. International media declared him dead within the hour. Target 2. Yvette Shadowhawk Tapsoba. She had just crossed into the outskirts of Ouagadougou with her team, drenched in sweat, limping from the wounds of Camp Horizon. But as they reached a safe house near Kadougou, they were met with silence. No guards, no backup, just a ticking sound under the floor. Maimouna screamed, "Trap!" But it was too late. The explosion ripped the house apart. Dust, fire, silence. But 14 minutes later, through smoke and blood, Yvette emerged, half her uniform gone, wounded but alive, carrying a USB drive clenched in her mouth, the last copy of the African Files. Maimouna and Fanta had shielded her from the blast. Both unconscious, one not breathing. Across Africa, chaos unfolded. Riots broke out in Nigeria. Kenya declared martial law. Senegalese youth clashed with riot police, chanting, "We are not your colonies." But then, something unexpected happened. Mali, Niger, Guinea, and Chad broadcasted a joint message. Burkina Faso is not alone. An attack on Traore is an attack on all of us. The African Military Unity Council, AMUC, was born that day. They sent troops, medical aid, and air support. And from Tanzania to Togo, former enemies stood shoulder to shoulder, protecting a spark they had long waited for. Back in the capital, Traore was not dead. He had faked his location. The real bunker, 20 meters beneath the ruins of an old slave trade tunnel, remained untouched. As the world mourned him, he was watching everything unfold on a flickering monitor. And when he saw the Lionesses survive the trap, when he saw Africa rising, he stood up, slowly, with fire in his eyes. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Now, let's finish what they started. But just as he reached for the radio to contact Yvette, a gun cocked behind his head. A shadowy figure stepped from the dark, wearing the insignia of a foreign power. "Not so fast, Captain. Your story ends tonight." The gun pressed cold against the back of Traore's head. The shadowy figure stepped fully into view. Tall, lean, dressed in a black tactical suit with no insignia. But Traore recognized the accent when the man spoke again. "Belgian, NATO-trained, a cleaner. You're brave, Captain, but you've disturbed the balance. The files, the women, your voice. It was never supposed to go this far." Traore didn't move, but his mind raced. 10 seconds. That's all he needed. "You've come this far," Traore said calmly. "But you forgot one thing." "What's that?" Traore gave a subtle smirk. "You're standing in a dead man's tunnel." He stomped his heel twice. Click. A hidden wall burst open behind him. And out stepped General Doumbia, the legendary war strategist from Mali, flanked by Burkinabe special forces. The ambush reversed. The cleaner turned to fire but never made it. 3 silenced shots dropped him instantly. Traore knelt beside the body, pulled out the assassin's encrypted phone, and muttered, "Let's see who sent you." Meanwhile, Yvette Tapsoba had reached a secret medical base in Kudugu with Maimouna and Fanta. Maimouna was still unconscious. Fanta had lost hearing in one ear, but they were alive. And more importantly, they weren't alone anymore. All across West Africa, elite women warriors were rising. From Senegal's night owls to Mali's iron widows, they began to form a coalition, an all-female special force alliance across Africa. They called it Daughters of the Soil. These women didn't wait for permission. They raided child soldier camps, intercepted foreign arms shipments, and hunted every operative linked to Camp Horizon and the architects. At the same time, the phone taken from the assassin revealed something horrifying. A scheduled biological attack planned for the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa during an upcoming summit. One that Traore and every African leader was invited to. The architects were preparing a second wave. This time not with bullets, but with a virus engineered to target specific ethnic markers, to cause panic, force foreign relief, and reopen the gates to control. Traore looked at the file. They're planning to use African blood to justify their return. He slammed the laptop shut. Then let's give them the opposite. Let's use our blood to defend each other. A mysterious island, surrounded by sharks, guarded by satellites, and hidden from every global map. Inside its deepest chamber, the man known only as the Architect stood before a dozen glowing monitors. He had ruled in silence for 40 years, toppling governments, orchestrating wars, and shaping Africa's destiny from the shadows. His face was pale, wrinkled, and cold, one eye artificial, the other filled with fire. Behind him stood 4 other shadowy figures, agents representing the most powerful global syndicates: finance, tech, energy, and pharmaceuticals. The architect tapped his cane once. Phase 1 failed. Traore lives. The files are public. The Lionesses walk free. Now we move to Phase 2. One of the agents replied, "We're activating all assets. Nigeria's corridor is already compromised. We can crash 5 currencies in 24 hours. Another added, "The virus is ready. Once released at the AU summit, panic will do the work for us. They'll beg for foreign aid and military help." The architect raised a shaky hand. "No, we won't release it yet. We wait until they feel victory. Then we poison their celebration." He paused, then turned toward a sealed glass chamber. Inside was a young African scientist, restrained and heavily drugged. Let's see what happens when a son of the soil becomes the weapon. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore studied the virus file. The more he read, the clearer the horror became. This wasn't just a disease. It was a genetically targeted bioweapon, engineered using blood samples taken from African refugees during fake health missions over the past decade. Yvette and the Lionesses had joined him in the war room. Maimouna was now awake, her face still bruised but burning with rage. Fanta looked at the map. They'll strike at the AU summit. It's in 6 days. Yvette asked, "What if we stop the summit before it begins?" Traore shook his head. "No, we don't stop it. We use it." He looked at the generals and resistance leaders now seated around the table, men and women from Mali, Guinea, Chad, and Congo. "We leak word that the summit is still on. We tighten our security, but allow the architects to think they're in control. And when they come," he turned to the Lionesses, "we end them, on live broadcast." Meanwhile, on the Ghana-Togo border, a convoy of relief trucks moved silently in the night. But inside the cargo wasn't food or medicine. It was weaponized drones, vials of the virus, and mercenaries in medical coats. The operation was disguised as a WHO mission. The world slept. Africa was dancing on a trap. And only the Lionesses, Traore, and a few trusted warriors stood between the continent and a second colonization, by science, fear, and silence. The summit day arrived. Addis Ababa glowed under a tense sky as presidents, generals, and media personnel gathered. Unseen by the world, Africa stood at the edge of an invisible war. Behind the scenes, Traore activated Operation Gem, a final unifying strike named after the drum that once called tribes to war and peace. The architect's virus team moved into position, dressed as aid workers. Their vials were hidden in oxygen tanks, laptop bags, even shoes. They had no idea every hallway, every gate, every shadow was being watched by women, the daughters of the soil, stationed across rooftops, kitchens, hospitals, even posing as janitors and waitresses. Then it happened. At 12:02 p.m., just as the opening speech was about to begin, a masked agent entered the presidential corridor, a silver case in hand. Inside, the virus bomb. He never made it. Yvette Tapsoba dropped from the ceiling and struck. One blow. The case hit the floor, rolling toward the open conference hall. I mounted a dove and caught it midair. Sealed, she shouted. Negative exposure, came another call. But the architects didn't send just one team. 4 more sleeper cells activated at once, across the summit, across cities, across airports. They thought they had planned for everything, but they hadn't planned for a united Africa. In Niger, youth militias stormed a hidden lab. In Cameroon, fishermen captured mercenaries hiding underwater gear. In Mali, market women exposed disguised agents using food stalls to transmit virus triggers. Even in Paris, African students hacked into satellite feeds and broadcasted the truth to the world. And just when the architect, hidden on his island, tried to execute a remote override, his screen turned black. Then a single face appeared, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Your time is over. Africa was never yours to control. The feed ended. Seconds later, a drone strike, coded Lioness roar, flattened the island. The architect, his files, and his empire erased. 6 months later, a new AU security charter was signed. An all-African intelligence network was formed. The Daughters of the Soil became a permanent, multinational force. And Captain Traoré, standing before a new generation of soldiers, male and female, delivered a final speech. We will never forget how they tried to use fear, poison, and division. But we remembered who we were. And we became what they feared the most. He paused, looked into the cameras. An Africa that fights back. Together. In a quiet village in Burkina Faso, Yvette, Fanta, and Maimouna sit beneath a mango tree, surrounded by schoolchildren. Tell us again, one child says, how you saved Africa. Yvette smiles. We didn't save it. We just reminded it that it was never weak.